Story 1. I wish I could find the thread. I think it was either on this subreddit or AskReddit. But someone posted an article with a lot of information on parents who have been essentially abandoned by their adult children due to abuse. There's some sort of gap in the parents' brains. When they talk about their circumstances, they can articulate that their kids are upset with them, but they literally do not absorb the reasoning. They talk about how their child yelled at them or said mean things to them, but the reasoning for not wanting a relationship goes right over their heads. Story 2. Structural family therapist here. A lot of parents invalidate their children's traumatic experiences because no one ever validated their own. As adults, they continue to seek out this validation as though they were still a child while neglecting their own child's emotional experience. They will justify it while thinking things like, "You think you have it bad?" Or "No one ever cared about me." Story 3. Partly because they are unwilling to accept reality and instead choose to live in an egocentric delusion, and partly because they are subconsciously projecting their own unresolved trauma. Story 4. Because they don't see them as equals. Sure, kids are kids and are growing and learning, but that doesn't mean they are any less an individual than their parents. Story 5. My dad was abused growing up. I remember my grandmother saying that if she hadn't taken the kids and run, someone would have ended up dead, so it was bad. Fast forward to today, and my grandfather, whom I've all but written off, is senile and needs taking care of. Unfortunately, he's been a racist, angry, bigoted person his entire life, and there's nobody left. So my dad stepped in to do what needs to be done. It's costing him money, weeks of his time, and so much stress. So I asked him why. Just let the state take care of him. Forget him. His response was, "I want to be better than him, so I'll treat him like he should have treated me, with love." It takes something special to break the cycle of abuse. Story 6. Because they are all still children. Probably the biggest mind-blowing lesson that I learned growing up was that the adults are just making things up as they go, and many of the parents have zero clue how to be parents. Story 7. Growing up, my mother told me when I said I was depressed or suicidal that we would have me committed. I then would never get a good job or have a life. Well, yesterday she threw a fit and threatened her life, so I said, "Do we need to have you committed?" When she complained I wasn't being sympathetic, I said, "I'm just saying the things you said to me. I know it's not helpful, but it felt good to do." Story 8. The parents themselves feel confused, mistaking fear for respect. Instead of ruling with discipline, they rule with fear, damaging their child's ego, self-esteem, and many other feelings of self-worth, particularly into adulthood. I love my mother now, and only now that I'm older and understand the world and her younger days, do I understand why she was the way she was with me. I feared my mum, but unfortunately, that sense of timidity extracted from fear diluted my self-confidence well into my adulthood. Slowly getting better with age. Instead of explaining my mistakes and why it's wrong to do certain things, I just get a slap. Which is awful when you're 5, it's so confusing. You're just told, "That's bad," or "Don't do it." Any questions like, "Why?" just come off as an insult, resulting in further humiliating punishments. "I don't have to explain myself to you" is a common one, and in my opinion, yes, you do. If you drill into your child not only the rights and wrongs but the why, your child will understand their mistakes and learn. I wasn't a bad child, just playful. But when I got in trouble, I was left to stew in my own misery and resentment, which absolutely affects me today. My mom was a single parent, unfortunately an alcoholic, which changed her for the worse. Alcohol doesn't excuse her behavior, but it does explain it. It's extremely important not to belittle, humiliate, or bully your child after they do wrong. Teach them why it's wrong, the consequences of it, and reward them for keeping good behavior. My mom never let me go without food or clothes. Ever. She tried her best with what she had. Unfortunately, her personal issues bled into her parenting attributes, and it really affected me. Story 9. Because it is passed down to the parents by the way they were treated by their own parents. It is disgusting how children are treated with such contempt. We make such a great show of doing so much for our children, but it is almost always materialistic. Emotionally, children are abused and neglected. Their emotions are belittled. They grow up mistrusting themselves and their feelings. Then they treat others with the same level of mistrust and contempt, including their own children, and the cycle continues. Story 10. Because their parents treated them that way, they feel like it's their turn. I'm very lucky because my parents never belittled me. At least my mom didn't. And if she's tripping, I can call her out on her behavior, and she'll say, "Yeah, you're right. I messed up there." And she does the same to me. It's mostly pretty healthy. My dad is a different story, but he got a bit better. It all boils down to respect. Story 11. They think they own you. They think they put you in this world so they can take you out of it. Don't let parents disrespect you like this. You are equals. Your mother gave birth to you, but she is a vessel. She didn't create you. Your dad just came. What an achievement, right? What right do they have to bully you? Kids having kids, that's what it is. Some people should just never be parents. Compulsory parenting courses are needed. Some adults are less mature than toddlers. Story 12. Because they are terrible people. My parents treat me well, but I cannot say the same for their parents. They are still treated as kids, and the things my dad tells me about what happened to him as a child are just horrible. Story 13. This screams narcissistic parent. Usually, they project everything they feel about themselves onto other people. They are incapable of loving their own children but rather see them as extensions of themselves. The way a narcissist works is that, in their mind, they should be able to treat people however they want and do whatever they want with no consequences, but nobody is ever allowed to stand up to them, or they will feel their wrath. Narcissists usually project an air of grandiosity, but in reality, they are extremely insecure and have low self-esteem. They go around treating other people poorly to make themselves feel better. Anyone who behaves this way is clearly a narcissist. Steer clear of those kinds of people. They can come off as charming at first, but you'll quickly learn that you are in a nightmare scenario with someone who is almost quite literally a toddler trapped in an adult body. I say this from experience. I dated one for 2 years. Story 14. I think some parents don't consider what they are actually doing to their child until it's too late. Not saying the parents should mess up and treat their kids poorly, but I think a lot of it happens without them knowing how much of an effect it actually has on the child or how much of a toll it takes. Some may not even realize they do it because it becomes normal behavior to them. But when someone does it to them, it's completely chaotic or barbaric because normally they are the ones who are acting poorly instead of being mistreated themselves. But this is all just my opinion. Story 15. Because their children will be the only people they will have any power over. If they had power over other adults, they would be mean to them too. Mean people act mean. Unfortunately, mean people also can have kids. Story 16. In some cases, it's also that children are dependent, and when they're young cannot stand up for themselves, which allows parents to continue their poor behavior. It's an unbalanced power dynamic. Also, parents do what they know, and it can be cultural. I was raised in the United States, and although my parents were decent, I've seen how other kids were treated. Now I've lived in Sweden for 5 years, and the difference in how parents treat their children is still shocking to me on a daily basis. They treat them with more respect. The focus is not on disciplining the child who should learn to obey the parent, but rather on calmly explaining rules so the child understands them and usually never yelling, even when the child fails to understand or misbehaves. Story 17. My mother liked to use the excuse of, "We're not the same people. I'm your mother, so I get to disrespect you." I loved my mom, but did this infuriate me? Story 18. Parents aren't magically more mature than children. I've met plenty of adults who are much less mature than some children I know. My father was a devout Christian and went the God route. It doesn't matter if he is right, only that he is absolute. My father is a complete moron. He believes so many foolish things that he'll never change. He was also physically and psychologically abusive, racist, and is basically afraid of anything he can't identify with or control. I will never have children, but I will never let myself become him. I will treat all people with kindness and compassion simply to defy him, but more so because that is the world I want to live in. Story 19. Because parents who do these things use them because they provide immediate gratification or are seen as immediate solutions to their children's behavior. If these parents use techniques that provide immediate results, we can hardly expect them to understand or think about the long-term effects of doing so. Story 20. When I was growing up, my mom would make me beg and plead for anything I wanted. Now that I'm getting that government assistance, she wants me to buy her things, but it is already ingrained in me that people need to beg before you help them. Story 21. It's funny I came across this. I just spent hours having a heart-to-heart with my stepson about how his mom and stepdad treat him. He is 15, and they act like he is an awful kid just because he doesn't have the same hobbies as them. He opened up about how they talk to him and how he hears them talk about him, and he started crying. At the end, he said he couldn't remember the last time he cried. We had a wonderful talk with tears and laughter. I have been his stepmom for 10 years, and I have never felt closer to him. Story 22. Parents usually belittle and bully their children because they were bullied by their parents when they were children themselves, and that's the only way they know how to act. Now, realizing you are a bad person and that you need to work on yourself is hard. So hard some people prefer to disregard any evidence that they are bad people, pour soot over their heads, and play the victim card. This is why you will never hear an estranged parent ever bring up anything that would put them in a bad light. Story 23. My father was a monster. He humiliated and disrespected me when I was a child, and my mom wasn't strong enough to respond. Every day, he would do anything to try and make me feel worthless, telling me no one loves me. I am nothing, just a piece of garbage. He would beat me if I tried to respond to him. I tried suicide but never actually did it because of the pain it would have caused my mom. Even now, I have a hard time accepting myself and talking about my feelings. Story 24. To what degree are we talking? Most of those terms are significant, but a little bit of shame can go further in correcting a behavior than a physical intervention. Being forced to clean your room before seeing friends wouldn't be bullying, but some kids might say it is. Having a curfew is a legitimate boundary, but some kids might say it's disrespectful. Being called out on your dishonesty, especially as a teenager, can correct an undesirable behavior, but some kids might call it humiliation. Good parenting is a balancing act. Story 25. Many parents who haven't matured themselves try to justify their personal failings by ensuring that their children will make the same bad decisions they do daily. They pick fights, yell, and make frightened children unhappy until they behave badly in ways similar to the parents' failings or are completely alienated by their parents' behavior and leave their lives for enough years that the parent decides it's time to be nice to their child because they are lonely. Story 26. My dad would put me down and make fun of me, so I did the same to others since that's how he treated me. He would get upset if I talked back, and nowadays, since I'm much older and independent of him, he can't do anything to me. Story 27. My father's nickname for me, even when I was little, was silly for brains. Now that I have my own child, I cannot imagine ever saying such a cruel and degrading thing to her. It makes me sad for little me. Story 28. I've always known my parents had their flaws, but as I'm aging, the flaws are becoming more and more prevalent. I'm thankful that, overall, my parents did a pretty good job of raising me, but I see the cracks show up here and there. I guess I was good at the whole do as I say, not as I do thing, which isn't really bad, I guess. I still admire them and am grateful for them, but it's clear now that I'll have to improve on them in the next generation. Story 29. Personally, my dad is a borderline narcissist who was so emotionally stunted by his own alcoholic, abusive father and manipulative mother that he had little to no empathy when it came to a kid with attention deficit disorder. I realize as I get older, though, for someone with the upbringing he had, scream at them until they act right was the gentlest form of parenting he knew, and I frankly got off easy. Story 30. I have a theory that children are disrespected, belittled, bullied, and humiliated because of a common underlying premise that permeates society: that children aren't really human. It is easier to treat someone with less respect when you don't see them as humans with agency and emotions. These adults also have a limited understanding of how malleable children are and how their environment can create lifelong habits. Unfortunately, habits are hard to break. This premise is possibly subconscious and may be influenced by our understanding of brain development. For some reason, children are categorized as not being mentally competent because the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25. Story 31. Parents think they are in the right because they are older, doesn't matter what they do. Of course, they know many things better because they have experience, but they also don't know all. Story 32. You okay? Not all parents do that. It's the same with any age person in any position. Some people are cool and mentally and emotionally healthy, and some aren't. When it is your turn to be the parent, just be the best parent you can be and don't do the bad things your parents are doing. When you're old enough, if you aren't already, work your butt off to move as far from them as you can if that's what you need to do. I just don't want you thinking all parents are bad. You shouldn't label one entire group of people in a certain way, good or bad. But that's just my opinion. If you think all parents are bad, you might miss out on some good advice or relationships from someone. If you think an entire group of people is good, you might put some mistrust in someone and get hurt. Use sound judgment. Be safe out there.